Hiya, it's one of those funny sleepover videos. I'm here for Tuesday tips on Wednesday because things got away from me. And I want to talk about color pooling. And that is a way to use multicolored fabrics like this one I'm showing you here. And not worrying so much about cutting them and keeping them in order. You know that old saw where people cut wool and then they, excuse me, then they tape it down so it's in the exact order it was cut. When that happens, it often looks quite stiff and it's not all that attractive. So let's look where I used this piece of wool here, and I started in this corner with this end, and I gradually worked my way out. I call this cell block. Worked my way out all the way to the opposite corner where I ended up with this, and you can see that, and you can see the colors in between. So I just gradually worked my way up, and sometimes there were adjustments to be made. I like to use the old do-si-do sometimes, but what I try to do in my work here is have areas meet, so that brown is meeting here. I have this little interesting white portion in this area, and it met here and here and here, but you can see they're linear when that happened, and that's important that you keep a constancy. And you can also see the turquoise appearing that way and the darker blue, and this is how you work color pooling, and it's a great way to do it. And you can do backgrounds like this or any other thing. And as a matter of fact, with this piece I use color pooling in the interior as well to create these interesting color flows. So I think that I sat down here like a doofus and didn't bring a hook, and that's going to be important when I show you how to color pool. So you can just think about opportunities to use color pooling, and I'll be back in 2 shakes while I get myself a hook. That's one good thing about being a rug hooker. There's always hooks to be found. So, strangely enough, I'm going to use a piece that was left over, the very middle of the piece of wool, from making this, and that's why the colors look familiar. And I'm going to color pool these to make my leaf veins, because whenever we do a leaf, we always start with the vein first, and get that filled in so that we don't have to worry about trying to put it in afterwards. And I usually put in quite a few loops, especially right here, because I'm going along the bias, and I'm probably going to be going along the bias the entire length of this stem. And you can see it's easy to do it this way because it's just a single line, and I am working as it arises. Now, what is going to happen here? I have to deviate out a little bit, and I kind of misdrew this, so I'm going down another loop, and then I'm going to go to the side and work up and out a little bit to make a vein going out here. And you can see the colors are starting to change a little, making it interesting. And now I'm going to cut it. But when I want to continue the other side, if I suddenly put this color here, it's not really going to go very well. So I'm going to stop there, and I am going to go from this end here, the darker end that I held below there, and I'm going to put the stem on. I'm going to start working my stem up through this way, so that I'm using this up. I wanted it to be this color anywho, so I just plug it in here. So different people will say this color pooling technique wastes a lot of wool. Well, I don't find that. The actual event of it is so attractive that even if I do have a couple of, like I had a little bit of this left over that I cut this from making that whole little rug. It was a 1/4 yard, and I thought that is still a very useful piece of fabric. So as always, when we don't have anything around these loops and they're going on the bias, they can get a little jumbly looking. And I'm just going to hook all the way up to wherever it stops. And when it stops being this color, oh, I'm starting to get a little bit of pink in there. I'm going to take another extra loop, I think. So that's going to end up being very nice. I'm coming right into the leaf at the end. So then I've got this nice color change here. So now we have to work this out. So sometimes what I'll do is I'll put in my end, and I don't want it to be like this. I want it to be more like this, and I'll just pull it up a bit until I start seeing, okay, there it is. So I'm going to let this be more pink on this side just for artistic sake. It's not always great to make everything so uniformly the same. And as I come into here, you can see that I'm going to be able to easily just pick up this color conversation. Everything's meeting here. The colors are pooling where I want them to. I'm going to work my way down, and hopefully when I get to this section, I will be color matching with it somewhat. If I'm not, and I feel dissatisfied by that, so I have a pink patch here and a pink patch here, looks a little stripy, what I'm going to do is just cut this loop off. So now I get to decide what's going to happen next. So one thing I could do is do this vein here, starting out here, and move down to color pool more evenly and accurately, because it's slightly less distance with this guy here. And then I don't get this weird effect that I was getting when this was part of a straight line. I think that's handsome enough. If I don't like it, let's say I don't. Let's say I don't like this one little bit. So I could, just cut that off right there. And then that would be something for another leaf that I'm making or something at another time. I'm going to cut this off also. Usually I don't cut them off because I like knowing where they ended, and the cut mark is a good way to tell. So now what I want to do is I want to be able to pull this up to the place where I feel is most advantageous. So I might let's see, I'm going to pull it down to there. So this is how I can color pool with this. And let's see if I can get down to a more matching. Well, this is working out nicely because you can see where my pinks are in a row here, and that is a good thing because that's the kind of thing that happens with nature. So now I'm getting into the pink again. So what I'm going to do is back up that little end. I'm going to back it up to here and let the two pinks meet. I think that's going to work. So you can see how I made these adjustments to get my veins and everything the way I wanted. And I have a bit of leftover wool, but I'm not too concerned about it. And if I wanted to have more pink in the situation, I can just judge and say to myself, could I put that there? And I probably could with an okay effect without worrying too much. Yeah, so there's lots of things that you can do. And the other thing I could do too, if I really wanted to be interesting, making sure that you can see, I could bring another vein up here, or even down here as it's closer to the yellow, and let it turn into the same effect as the stem, which is an artful way to use color, to let it pool together. So, one more. Oops. Wouldn't think I knew how to hook after all this time. Okay, so there we go. And you can see that's very lovely, and the colors are moving in a way that's attractive. And that's what I always am looking for, to make something artful rather than just going along the flow with our wool. So now I have this. and I would like to try to color pool with it a little bit to create the rest of my leaf. So let's see what happens. So I'm just going to lay this in along the side here and see how far I get. And normally what I do, especially when I'm working in a situation like this that should kind of be the same on both sides, I'll start with one side and then go to the other. Sometimes I'll work leaves moving from the vein out, but in this case, when I want to color pool, it's important that I stick to that job. We can use this with all kinds of things like spot dyes and all manner of things for backgrounds. I probably should have had a smaller cut. I didn't draw my leaf very big, and I'm going on the line instead of inside of it, so I have more control, but you know the rules, and here I am breaking them. So now I've done one side, and now I want to go just below the loop I started. I'm also using a very fine hook for my size of my cut. Oh my goodness. Preparation is half the battle, you know, people. So now I'm going to just work myself down in this way too. And of course, the age-old question is, well, how are we going to fill that in? Well, this is where color pooling can come into the situation. I could have, for instance, let's do it on this side. Once I get here and there's room for another loop, I can do the do-si-do. So you hook one loop, you hook one beside it, you hook one below it, and you go inside again. And you begin the whole thing all over again. So this is another way you can color pool. 1, 2, 3, 4. This time it's going to take 5 going across because it's getting wider. So you can see how that's also color pooling and making an interesting effect. So I have that one, so I'm going to go below it. I'm going to go beside it. And I have to go 3 across now, I think. So this way, the colors are changing slowly, but in a different way. Now this makes a little bit more bumpy back, and that's okay. So you can kind of see the way the one sides work, and I'm going to do one side one way and one side the other. With this one, I pull up my end where I have room to, and I want to be careful because I want to kind of match this color. I don't want it to be too far deviated from the color it's in. So I probably should have pulled it up a weensy bit further. You see how I judge that, and I pull it back and forth till it's the way I want it to be. And this works with yarn and any other dang thing you have that's multicolored. So you can see how I'm just going to follow along with this. Let me go back to the do-si-do side because I want to show you what happens. So in this case, you're going to have an end and an end, but it could be that you might need to use this end over here or this one over here. It all depends. So now this is a purple section, and always with the do-si-doing and the color pooling with that method, you want to start where it ended off purple. You just pull it through, and now I have to kind of do-si-do in a 2 square way because look, how am I going to deal with that? So this is very interesting. Let's see what happens. 1, 2, 3, 4. And so this is a case where this end here could fill up that space, but let's carry on with our do-si-doing. So I'm going along beside them and then back and forth. So I'm going to put a green end there. I'm going to come down here, and you can see I'm starting to turn a little golden now. Now if I wanted to, and I can see I would prefer to have a golden tip, I can go like that. but then I'm not going to get the color pooling that I need there. So you can see how interesting this all is. Probably, were I a wise person, I would have measured this before so that I would have understood how much am I going to need and what's going to happen. And you also don't have to be like super, you know, super formal or prissy, I guess I would say, about what's going to happen. So let's say I want to have green running down here, or the green gold before it turns gold. And then I'm going to do-si-do back up here so I can have a golden point. Because that, now I made my smooth transition by just making that little adaptation. There. So now I would cut this. And so you can see how I'm getting these nice sections of color all belonging together, and I don't suddenly have golden stuck in there. I don't suddenly have, you know, I'm not going to start a golden end in here. I'm going to start again with my violets and move along. Let's fill up this space here with this one and see how that works out. So now, because it's mostly all the same color, I can just kind of fill it in. And I'm going to do-si-do again, but I'm going to start with the other end because it was a little bit too violet there, and I want it to be more like this end. So I'm do-si-doing back and forth, and then pull up my final end. So I'm showing you how you can use up those little ends and bits. So do you see what I mean? It's really good if you have some texture that you want to be able to try to do that with. I don't know if you've been able to see me very well. If not, you can ask me any questions you want to. Okay? Pooling. It's a good thing, and it works well for you. Let me cut this off so I can show you. Why not give it a try on some scrappy bits of something or other? Have a good day. I hope you enjoyed this tip.